My name is David. I'm 28 years old, and I'm about to tell you how I destroyed my sister's dream wedding and watched my entire family implode in the most spectacular way possible. This story involves betrayal, lies, stolen money, and the most savage revenge I've ever witnessed or participated in. I need to start by explaining the twisted dynamics of my family, because without that context, what I did might seem unnecessarily cruel. Trust me, by the end of this story, you'll understand why I felt completely justified in my actions. I'm the older of two siblings. My younger sister Emma is 25, and she's what people politely call high maintenance and what I call a manipulative, entitled princess who has never faced a real consequence in her entire life. From the time Emma could talk, she learned that crying, screaming, and throwing tantrums would get her whatever she wanted. My parents, Linda and George, were completely wrapped around her little finger. If Emma wanted something I had, she would cry until they made me give it to her to keep the peace. If Emma didn't want to do chores, she would have a meltdown until my parents assigned them to me instead. Favoritism was so extreme that even extended family members noticed it. My grandmother once pulled my mother aside at a family gathering and told her that the way they treated Emma versus me was creating a monster. My mother's response was that Emma was more sensitive and needed extra support and understanding. This pattern continued throughout our childhood and into our teenage years. Emma got designer clothes while I shopped at thrift stores. Emma got a brand new car for her 16th birthday while I had to work part-time to buy my own used Honda. Emma's room was redecorated 3 times during high school because she kept changing her mind about what she wanted, while my room stayed exactly the same from age 10 until I moved out. The worst part wasn't even the material stuff, it was the emotional manipulation. Emma learned early that she could get me in trouble by lying to our parents about things I had supposedly done. She would break something in the house and blame me, knowing that our parents would believe her over me every single time. When I tried to defend myself or point out Emma's lies, my parents would say things like, "David, you're the older brother. You need to be more mature and understanding. Emma looks up to you and you're setting a bad example by being jealous and accusatory." Phrase "Emma looks up to you" became a running joke in my head because Emma didn't look up to anyone except herself. She saw me as competition for our parents' attention and resources, and she was determined to win at any cost. High school was when the disparity really became obvious to outsiders. I was a good student with a 3.7 GPA, played varsity soccer, and had been accepted to several decent colleges. Emma was an average student at best, spent most of her time focused on social media and dating, and had no clear plans for her future. When I graduated and was preparing to go to college, my parents threw me a small family dinner. When Emma graduated 3 years later with a 2.8 GPA and no college prospects, they threw her a massive party with extended family, catered food, and professional photography. I remember asking my mom why Emma's graduation party was so much bigger than mine had been. Her response was, "Well, David, college was always a given for you. You're naturally academic, but Emma struggled more in school, so we want to celebrate her achievement more because it was harder for her." That logic made absolutely no sense to me. If anything, shouldn't the person who worked harder and achieved more get the bigger celebration? In my family's twisted worldview, Emma's mediocrity was more worthy of praise than my actual accomplishments. College was my escape from the dysfunction at home. I studied business administration, maintained a 3.8 GPA, and graduated with a job already lined up at a consulting firm. I was finally free from Emma's drama and my parents' favoritism. Emma, meanwhile, spent a year after high school finding herself, which mostly involved working part-time at a boutique and living at home rent-free. She eventually enrolled in community college but dropped out after 1 semester, claiming that the professors were mean and that the coursework was too stressful. My parents supported her decision, saying that Emma was creative and academic environments weren't right for everyone. Continued to support her financially while she bounced between various part-time jobs and pursued her passions. During this time, I was building my career and my life. I got promoted twice in my first 3 years at the consulting firm, moved to a nice apartment, and started dating seriously. I had minimal contact with my family, calling maybe once a month and visiting for major holidays. The calls home were always the same. My parents would ask briefly about my work and then spend the rest of the conversation talking about Emma's latest drama, Emma's new job, Emma's relationship problems, or Emma's big plans for the future. When I was 25, I met Jessica, who would eventually become my fiancée. Jessica was everything Emma wasn't: independent, hardworking, emotionally mature, and genuinely kind. Had her own successful career as a marketing manager and came from a family that valued education and personal responsibility. I was hesitant to introduce Jessica to my family because I knew how they were, but after we had been dating for a year, she insisted on meeting them. The visit was exactly the disaster I had predicted. Emma was 22 at the time and was working as a hostess at an upscale restaurant while living at home. She had been dating a guy named Tyler for about 6 months, and according to my parents, this was the most serious relationship she'd ever had. Within 10 minutes of meeting Jessica, Emma had managed to make the conversation entirely about herself. She dominated dinner with stories about her job, her relationship with Tyler, and her plans to become an influencer on social media. Every time Jessica tried to contribute to the conversation, Emma would interrupt or redirect attention back to herself. The worst part was when Emma started complaining about how hard her life was compared to mine. She said things like, "David has always had everything so easy. Good grades just came naturally to him, and he never had to work for anything. I've had to struggle for everything I've achieved." I was so shocked by the audacity of this statement that I couldn't even respond. This was coming from someone who had been financially supported by our parents for her entire adult life and had never faced a real challenge or consequence. Jessica, bless her heart, tried to be diplomatic. She said something like, "Well, different people have different strengths and face different challenges." But I could see in her eyes that she was starting to understand the family dynamics I had tried to explain to her. After dinner, my parents pulled me aside and told me how much they liked Jessica, but they also made sure to mention that Emma seemed a little insecure about my relationship. They asked if I could be sensitive about how I talked about Jessica around Emma because they didn't want Emma to feel bad about her own relationship. On the drive back to the hotel, Jessica was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "David, I need to ask you something and I want you to be completely honest with me. Is your sister always like that?" I told her the truth about growing up with Emma and my parents' favoritism. Jessica listened without judgment, but I could see that she was processing how toxic my family dynamic really was. "The thing that bothers me the most," Jessica said, "isn't even how they treat you. It's how they've enabled Emma to become this entitled, self-centered person who has no idea how the real world works. They're not doing her any favors by protecting her from consequences." That conversation was a turning point for me. Having an outsider validate my experience and point out things I had never fully articulated helped me understand just how dysfunctional my family really was. Jessica and I got engaged 6 months later. I called to tell my parents the news. Their first reaction was excitement, but their second reaction was concern about how Emma would handle it. "You know, Emma has been hoping Tyler will propose soon," my mom said. "She might be a little sensitive about you getting engaged first. Maybe you could wait to announce it publicly until we see what happens with Emma and Tyler." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They wanted me to delay announcing my engagement so that Emma wouldn't feel bad about her own relationship status. "Mom," I said, "I'm 26 years old. I'm not going to put my life on hold because Emma might have hurt feelings." "David, you know how Emma gets when she feels left out or like she's falling behind. We just want to keep the peace in the family." I told them that Jessica and I would be announcing our engagement on our own timeline and that Emma would need to deal with her feelings like an adult. This was apparently the wrong response because I got a call from Emma herself 2 hours later. Emma was crying and hysterical, claiming that I was trying to steal her thunder and that I knew she was expecting Tyler to propose soon. She accused me of getting engaged specifically to hurt her and said that I was being selfish and cruel. I tried to explain that my engagement had nothing to do with her, but Emma was beyond reason. She said that if I announced my engagement before she got engaged, she would never forgive me and that it would ruin her relationship with Tyler. The manipulation was so blatant and ridiculous that I almost laughed. But instead, I told Emma that her reaction was proving exactly why I had distanced myself from the family, and that if she couldn't be happy for me, then maybe she shouldn't be involved in my wedding planning. This led to a massive family crisis. My parents called me multiple times over the next week, trying to get me to compromise with Emma. They suggested that Jessica and I wait 3 months before announcing our engagement, or that we announce it privately to family but not publicly on social media. Jessica was furious about the whole situation. She said that any family that would try to manipulate their son's engagement timeline to protect their daughter's feelings was not a family she wanted to be closely involved with. We announced our engagement on our own timeline, posted it on social media, and started planning our wedding. Emma didn't speak to me for 2 months, and my parents were cold and distant during our phone calls. The situation got worse when Jessica and I started wedding planning. We set a date for the following fall and began looking at venues, choosing vendors, and making arrangements. We were paying for the wedding ourselves and planning a relatively modest celebration with about 100 guests. Emma, meanwhile, had indeed gotten engaged to Tyler about 3 months after my engagement. But instead of being happy and moving on, she became obsessed with comparing every detail of her wedding plans to mine. She wanted to know what venue we had chosen, what our budget was, how many guests we were inviting, what Jessica's dress looked like, and every other detail of our plans. When my parents would call me, they would spend most of the conversation pumping me for information about our wedding that they could relay back to Emma. It became clear that Emma was trying to outdo our wedding in every possible way. When she found out our guest count, she increased hers. When she learned about our budget, she demanded that my parents contribute more money so she could spend more. When she saw pictures of Jessica's dress, she went shopping for something more expensive and elaborate. The competition was so obvious and petty that even Tyler seemed embarrassed by Emma's behavior. During one family dinner, Emma was going on and on about her wedding plans, and Tyler quietly said to me, "I'm sorry about all this, man. I've tried to tell her that your wedding has nothing to do with ours, but she won't listen." The final straw came about 6 months before both of our weddings. Jessica and I had been carefully saving money for our wedding and honeymoon for over a year. We had opened a separate savings account specifically for wedding expenses and had been contributing to it regularly. I also had a separate savings account that contained about $15,000 that I had been saving for years as an emergency fund and potential down payment on a house. This money was completely separate from our wedding budget, and Jessica and I planned to use it to start house hunting after we got married. The account was at the same bank where I had done my banking since college, and my parents were still listed as beneficiaries from when I had opened the account as an 18-year-old. I had never bothered to change the beneficiary information because I never thought it would matter. One day, I got a call from the bank saying there had been unusual activity on my emergency savings account. When I checked my account online, I discovered that the entire $15,000 had been withdrawn. Immediately called the bank to report the theft, but they told me that the withdrawal had been authorized by one of the account beneficiaries, my mother. Apparently, there was some obscure clause in the account agreement that allowed beneficiaries to access the funds in certain circumstances. I was in complete shock. I called my mother immediately and demanded to know why she had stolen my money. My mom's response was infuriating. She said that Emma's wedding had gone a little over budget and that they needed to help her cover some unexpected expenses. She said that since I was doing so well financially and Emma was struggling more, it made sense for the family resources to go where they were needed most. "Mom," I said, "that money doesn't belong to you or to Emma. It's my personal savings that I've been building for years." "You stole $15,000 from me." "David, don't be so dramatic. It's not stealing when it's family helping family. Emma will pay you back once she and Tyler get settled after the wedding." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mother had literally stolen my life savings to pay for Emma's wedding, and she was acting like I was being unreasonable for being upset about it. I called Emma directly and told her what had happened. Her response was even worse than my mother's. "David, I didn't ask Mom to take that money, but I'm not going to refuse help when it's offered. You make good money at your job, so you'll be able to save up again. This is my one special day, and I deserve to have the wedding of my dreams." She actually said, "I deserve to have the wedding of my dreams," after my family had stolen $15,000 from me to pay for it. I was so angry I could barely speak. I told Emma that she had until the end of the week to return my money or there would be consequences. She laughed and said, "What are you going to do, David? Sue your own family. Good luck with that." That night, I talked to Jessica about what had happened. She was absolutely furious and said that this was the final proof that my family was completely toxic and beyond redemption. She said that if they could steal from me to fund Emma's wedding, there was no limit to how far they would go to enable Emma's selfishness. "David," she said, "I know they're your family, but these people will never change. Emma will never take responsibility for her actions, and your parents will never stop enabling her. The question is, are you going to let them get away with this?" I spent the next week trying to get my money back through normal channels. Called my parents multiple times, begged, threatened, and pleaded. They kept saying that Emma would pay me back eventually, but that I needed to be patient and understanding. I called Emma and Tyler and had the same conversation. Emma was dismissive and said I was making a big deal out of nothing. Tyler was more apologetic but said he couldn't control Emma's decisions and that he was staying out of the family drama. By the end of the week, it was clear that nobody was going to return my money voluntarily. That's when I decided to take matters into my own hands. I started by consulting with a lawyer about my legal options. The lawyer said that while I technically had grounds for a lawsuit, it would be expensive, time-consuming, and might not be successful given the complex beneficiary situation with the bank account. The lawyer also gave me an idea that hadn't occurred to me. He mentioned that if Emma had used stolen money to pay wedding vendors, those vendors might be interested to know that the payments were made with funds that didn't belong to the person who authorized them. That's when I came up with my plan. I spent the next 2 weeks doing research and detective work. Found out which vendors Emma had hired for her wedding: the venue, the caterer, the photographer, the florist, the DJ, and the dress shop. I also figured out approximately how much she had paid each of them and when the payments had been made. Then I started making phone calls. I called the wedding venue first and asked to speak to the manager. I explained that I was the brother of the bride and that there was a payment dispute that they needed to be aware of. I told them that the $4,000 deposit that had been paid to them 2 weeks earlier had been made with funds that were stolen from my personal bank account. The venue manager was obviously concerned and said they would need to investigate the situation. I provided them with documentation from my bank showing the unauthorized withdrawal and my mother's name as the person who had made it. I made similar calls to the caterer: $3,500, the photographer $2,500, the florist $1,200, and the DJ $800. To each vendor, I explained the situation and provided documentation showing that the payments had been made with stolen funds. The dress shop was a special case. Emma had spent $2,500 on her wedding dress, and I happened to know that she had bought it just 3 days after my money was stolen. Called the shop and explained that the payment for the dress had been made with funds stolen from my account. The shop manager was very sympathetic and said that they had a policy of not accepting payments that were made with stolen funds. She said that if Emma couldn't provide alternative payment within 48 hours, they would have to repossess the dress. Within 24 hours of making these calls, Emma's perfect wedding started falling apart. Venue called her and said that due to the payment irregularities, they were canceling her contract and refunding the deposit. The caterer, photographer, and DJ all made similar calls. The florist said they would need certified funds or they couldn't provide the flowers. The dress shop was the most devastating blow. They called Emma and told her that she had 48 hours to provide alternative payment for the dress, or they would be picking it up. Dress had already been altered to fit her perfectly, so she couldn't just buy a different dress at the last minute. Emma called me in hysterics. She was screaming and crying and saying that I had ruined her life and destroyed her wedding. She said that I was evil and vindictive and that she would never forgive me. Emma, I said calmly, you could have avoided all of this by simply returning the money you stole from me. You made your choice and now you're facing the consequences. David, please, I'm begging you, call these people back and tell them it was a misunderstanding. I'll find a way to pay you back, I promise. Emma, you had a week to pay me back and you laughed in my face. You said I couldn't do anything about it. Well, now you know what I can do about it. She hung up on me, but the calls kept coming. My parents called me and said I was destroying the family and that I was going too far. They said that Emma was having panic attacks and that Tyler was threatening to call off the wedding entirely. My dad actually said, David, I never thought you could be this cruel. Emma is your sister and you're destroying the most important day of her life over money. Dad, I replied, Emma destroyed her own wedding when she decided to use stolen money to pay for it. If you want to fix this situation, you have exactly 24 hours to get me my $15,000 back. Otherwise, Emma can figure out how to have a wedding with vendors who will actually accept legal payments. The next 24 hours were complete chaos. Emma was calling every vendor, trying to come up with new payment arrangements. Some vendors agreed to work with her if she could provide certified funds immediately. Others had already booked new clients and couldn't provide services on her date even if she paid them. My parents were scrambling to come up with the money to pay me back, but they didn't have $15,000 just sitting around. They tried to get a personal loan, but their credit wasn't good enough. Asked relatives for money, but nobody wanted to get involved in the drama. Emma tried to get a loan herself, but she had virtually no credit history and no significant income. Tyler had some savings, but not enough to cover the full amount, and he was starting to have serious doubts about marrying into a family that would steal money from each other. As the 24-hour deadline approached, Emma made one last desperate call to me. She was sobbing and begging, saying that she would do anything to fix the situation. She promised to pay me back with interest, to apologize publicly for her behavior, and to never ask the family for money again. Emma, I said, you had multiple opportunities to do the right thing and you chose not to. You said I couldn't do anything about it and you laughed at me. Now you're facing the consequences of your choices. David, please, I'm your sister. Can you do this to me? Emma, you're the one who did this to yourself. You used stolen money to pay for your wedding and now your vendors know about it. I didn't destroy your wedding, you did. The deadline passed and Emma's wedding vendors started officially canceling their contracts. The venue had already been rebooked, the photographer had accepted another job, and the dress shop had scheduled a pickup of Emma's dress. Emma's wedding, which was supposed to happen in 3 weeks, was effectively canceled. But the story doesn't end there. Tyler, who had been watching this entire drama unfold, made a decision that nobody saw coming. He called off the engagement. Tyler told Emma that he couldn't marry into a family where people stole from each other and where Emma felt entitled to use stolen money for her wedding. He said that the whole situation had shown him a side of Emma that he couldn't accept and that he didn't want to build a life with someone who had such a toxic relationship with money and family. Emma was devastated, but Tyler was done. He moved out of their shared apartment and started the process of getting his engagement ring back. My parents were furious with me, saying that I had destroyed Emma's life and broken up her relationship. Said that they would never forgive me for what I had done. But here's the thing, I felt absolutely no guilt about any of it. Emma had stolen my money, laughed about it, and told me there was nothing I could do about it. She had used that stolen money to try to fund the wedding of her dreams while showing no remorse or intention of paying me back. My parents had enabled the theft and then acted like I was being unreasonable for wanting my own money back. Tyler had made his own decision based on Emma's behavior and character, not because of anything I had done to manipulate the situation. The consequences that Emma faced were the direct result of her own choices and actions. If she had returned my money when I asked for it, none of this would have happened. If she had used her own money to pay for her wedding, the vendors never would have canceled their contracts. Instead, she chose to steal from me and then act like she was entitled to keep the money. She gambled that I wouldn't or couldn't do anything about it, and she lost that gamble. 3 months later, I got a certified check in the mail for $15,000. It came with a note from my father saying that they had finally managed to get a loan to pay me back, but that they expected me to make this right with Emma and the family. I deposited the check, but I didn't make anything right with anyone. As far as I was concerned, they had proven exactly who they were, and I was done trying to maintain relationships with people who would steal from me and then act like I was the problem. Jessica and I had our wedding as planned 6 months later. It was beautiful, intimate, and drama-free. My parents and Emma were not invited, and we didn't miss their presence at all. Emma never did get married. She dated a few people after Tyler, but word had gotten around our small hometown about what had happened, and most people were reluctant to get seriously involved with someone who had such obvious character issues. My parents still blame me for ruining Emma's life, but Emma ruined her own life through her choices and behavior. I just refused to be a victim of her theft and manipulation. Tyler, incidentally, married someone else 2 years later. According to mutual friends, he's very happy and has never regretted his decision to leave Emma. As for me, Jessica and I have been married for 3 years now. We bought a house, I got promoted to senior consultant, and we're expecting our first child. Have a life built on mutual respect, honesty, and healthy boundaries, everything my original family never provided. I don't regret destroying Emma's wedding. She destroyed it herself the moment she decided to use stolen money to pay for it. I just made sure there were consequences for her actions, something my parents had failed to do for her entire life. Some people might say I went too far, but I disagree. I had every opportunity to do the right thing, and she chose not to. She thought she could steal from me without consequences, and she was wrong. The wedding that never was is a perfect metaphor for Emma's entire life, built on lies, theft, and other people's money, and ultimately destined to collapse under the weight of her own selfishness and entitlement. And honestly, watching that collapse was the most satisfying experience of my entire relationship with my family.